but yeah, just on the on the subject of creating movements, and something that we've spoken about at length offline is about the importance of creating a community. I saw a TED talk last night as I was preparing for this discussion. I saw a TED talk that talked about how you create movements, and it said everyone gives credit to the leader, right? But in fact, the credit really we should really put the credit on the first follower, okay? Because until that person gets a follower, that person kind of looks like the lonely nutcase, right? You jumping out there on your own, in faith, with the hopes that people will catch on. But until you get that first follower, because the first follower is actually creating the momentum, and it's going to create the energy that other people are going to now start jumping in. And then they said you create what's called the I forget the exact words, but you're essentially creating an environment and a vibe where people don't want to get left out. So they're not necessarily interested in what's going on, but they're going to jump in just because they don't want to be the ones left out. Right. And that's how those movements kind of really create themselves and start, the momentum. So I think it falls back to the community, right? It's not so much about the leader, it's the engagement and activity that's going on amongst the people that's part of the community, right?
Yeah. I think that's something that we picked up on when we were doing the D2G experience. Mm-hmm. But I think, right now you hear a lot of talk about building a following, building an audience, and all those different things, right? So what I learned recently to kind of solidify what we were thinking in the past was, number one, nobody, granted, when you're working with people, you have to get permission from them, if you will, for them to follow you, right? You have to do something, create something where they've kind of given you permission to lead, if you will. So when it comes to building something that creates a movement, number one, the purpose has to be much bigger than yourself, right? A lot of people do things and their goal is to be the leader or the expert, which is great. People follow experts, right? But this comes down to a psychological thing. Robert Cialdini wrote a book called Influence. So there's several different things that influence people to follow. But beyond that, the biggest thing you want to build is community, right? You don't want to build an audience, right? You don't want to build a bunch of people following you. You don't want to create a thing, because that draws a line between you and the people, right? But when you create a community, that brings cohesion to what you're building.